Afrique en particulier, on accorde beaucoup de place vraiment à la religion, aux convictions, aux croyances religieuses et à la tradition. C'est ce qui fait que dans certaines communautés, le comportement même aussi est influencé fonction de ces convictions religieuses qui sont développées dans certains milieux d'Afrique, parce que en Afrique de manière générale, aussi comme dans le monde, il n'y a pas que le christianisme, il y a aussi le bouddhisme, il y a l'islam, et il y a pas mal de croyances religieuses. Mais ce qui est important, c'est de retenir que la communauté africaine est vraiment en majorité influencée par les coutumes, par les traditions et par les convictions religieuses. Qu'est-ce que moi je me relever par ici? En tant que pasteur, mais aussi en tant qu'expert en communication, je travaille à ONU Femmes dans une institution des Nations Unies qui prône l'égalité des genres, l'égalité des sexes, la promotion et le leadership de femmes dans toutes les sphères de décision. Et je suis dans mon aise de travailler dans ce milieu parce que j'ai l'impression que je suis en train de travailler au bon endroit. Pourquoi? Parce que travailler dans cette thématique me permet de montrer et de révéler vraiment la pensée. Moi, je suis dans le christianisme. La pensée de ce que la Bible parle de la femme, dont la Bible dit au sujet de la femme. Quand nous lisons le livre de Genèse, chapitre 1, là où la Bible parle clairement sur la création de l'homme. Donc, et puis on voit Genèse chapitre 2 à partir du verset 15, où on voit plus tard la Bible mentionner sur la formation ou la création de la femme. Mais beaucoup de gens peut-être ne se sont jamais rendus compte que la femme n'a pas été créée après l'homme. Quand on lit très bien la Bible, la femme n'a pas été créée après l'homme. L'homme et la femme ont été tous créés dans Genèse 1, le verset 26. Parce que Dieu dit, faisons l'homme à notre image, selon notre ressemblance. Et le verset 27, Dieu va encore ajouter, Dieu créa l'homme à son image, il est créa à l'image de Dieu, l'homme et la femme. Donc, à la création de l'homme, la femme aussi était créée. Mais quant à la manifestation ou à la formation physique de la femme est intervenue après la formation physique de l'homme. Et lorsque nous lisons encore le fond de cette pensée des Écritures, on ne voit pas Dieu mettre la femme en dessous de l'homme, ou Dieu mettre la femme, ou Dieu mettre la femme derrière l'homme. On voit Dieu mettre la femme aux côtés de l'homme. Et même lorsque le besoin s'est fait sentir, lorsque Dieu a regardé l'homme, il a dit qu'il n'est pas bon que l'homme soit seul. Je lui ferai une aide semblable. D'autres versions disent, je lui ferai la personne qui est comme lui. Je lui ferai son semblable. Donc, Dieu n'a pas dit que je lui ferai son inférieur ou je lui ferai la personne sur qui lui va dominer. Donc, il faudrait que nous puissions comprendre, ça c'est par rapport aux convictions religieuses liées au christianisme, celle à laquelle moi j'appartiens. Donc, je veux au fait dans cette option-là pour comprendre que le rôle et la place que Dieu a accordé à la femme depuis la création n'est vraiment pas ce que les traditions, ce que les coutumes, ce que les politiques font aujourd'hui. Donc, les coutumes veulent ne pas donner à la femme la place que Dieu lui a donnée dès la création. Dans la création de la femme et de l'homme, on ne voit pas que Dieu séparait les deux pour dire que donc l'homme lui gérerait et la femme ne gérerait pas. Donc le jardin a été confié au couple, c'est-à-dire à l'homme et à la femme. Et tous avaient un rôle mutuel de pouvoir s'entraider, de pouvoir marcher ensemble, de pouvoir gérer ce qui était mis à leur disposition. Donc il faut comprendre aussi qu'en même temps, ce sont ces convictions religieuses, ce sont ces coutumes, ce sont ces traditions aussi qui ont influencé le droit de manière générale, les lois aujourd'hui, qui font qu'il commence à y avoir de lois qui veulent maintenir un peu la femme pas dans le rôle tel que Dieu l'a institué depuis la création de l'humanité. Donc on voit dans notre milieu aujourd'hui, parce que dans le système des Nations Unies où je travaille à ONU Femmes, j'ai aussi dirigé un projet qu'on appelle flourishing, une campagne qui consistait à pouvoir sensibiliser les hommes à défendre le droit des femmes. J'allais dans les universités, dans les écoles, où j'étais en train de montrer, de faire comprendre aux garçons comme aux jeunes filles, aux hommes comme aux femmes, et que promouvoir les droits des femmes ce n'était pas soulever les femmes contre les hommes. Parce que l'homme ne deviendra pas femme et la femme ne deviendra pas l'homme. Donc, la participation de chacun, que ce soit de la femme et de l'homme, est important pour stabiliser et équilibrer l'avancement dans la communauté. La sensibilisation a été faite où vous sentez même que dans la pensée de plusieurs jeunes, ils ont déjà été cultivés par le fait que la femme c'est la maison, la femme c'est la cuisine. Ils avaient du mal à pouvoir intégrer cette mentalité où je les amenais à comprendre que lorsque nous travaillons pour la promotion et l'égalité des droits de femmes, c'est que nous sommes en train de nous amener nous-mêmes à sortir de pesanteurs qui maintiennent nos communautés dans la pauvreté. Parce que moi, je suis né d'une famille de 9 enfants, nous sommes 6 garçons et 3 filles. Donc ma mère, elle était extrêmement forte, elle est extrêmement forte. Vous imaginez que 6 garçons et 3 filles, il fallait être extrêmement coriace pour pouvoir élever ses enfants. Et c'est une femme qui nous a élevés. C'est une femme qui a élevé, que ce soit nous les garçons et nous les filles. Donc pour montrer combien c'est crucial, c'est important que nous puissions travailler de manière assez que la femme puisse jouer le rôle de premier rang dans la société, le rôle de premier rang dans les institutions religieuses, le rôle de premier rang dans les instances de prise de décision. Ça permettra à ce qu'il y ait de l'équilibre, que ce soit sur le plan économique, sur le plan politique et sur bien d'autres aspects. Peut-être que je pourrais revenir encore plus tard pour ne pas monopoliser la parole. Il y a beaucoup de choses à dire, mais seulement ce qu'il faut retenir. Aussi l'expérience que j'ai eue avec la formation de femmes lorsqu'il y avait la période des élections dans mon pays ici en RDC, les dernières élections qu'il y a eu, j'avais fait un constat, c'est que beaucoup de femmes avaient un problème, elles n'avaient pas accès aux réseaux sociaux ou accès à la technologie. Alors, en tant qu'expert en communication, j'avais proposé à mon bureau que nous puissions mettre en place une formation qui puisse permettre à ce que les femmes soient outillées de manière à ce qu'elles puissent aussi utiliser les réseaux sociaux, utiliser la technologie, la nouvelle technologie pour se mettre en avant-plan, vendre leur image, vendre leurs idées, vendre leurs projets, permettre à ce qu'elles puissent être massivement votées. Et Dieu merci, le projet avait connu une participation vraiment riche de plusieurs femmes de plusieurs provinces de la RDC qui ont suivi la formation et la plupart de femmes ont été élues, sont même dans les institutions aujourd'hui. Et les femmes qui n'ont pas été élues se sont regroupées en une synergie pour s'organiser davantage en vue de prochaines élections. Donc pour montrer que si nous mettons toutes les chances du côté des femmes, il y aura des grands exploits. Il y aura des changements spectaculaires parce que la femme incarne le changement. Merci, voilà ma petite contribution et j'y reviendrai peut-être plus tard. Merci.
Merci, Carlos. Thank you so much. I think it's really interesting to hear how your role at UN Women and your role as a pastor kind of go hand in hand together. We're really short on time, so I want to do one last lightning round for our panelists. So we'll go in maybe the same order that y'all spoken. So we'll start with Dr. Samar. And so I know that some of you highlighted some very important points on, what we can do to promote women's participation in public life, but during your comments. But I want to just ask, if there's one solution that you could offer to the audience on how to help bolster women's participation in public life, what would that one solution be? Just give me like the tweet version very quickly, a couple sentences. So we'll start with Dr. Samar.
Thank you again. I think one of the tools that we can empower women or anybody in the society, a gender-friendly education system or quality education with gender-friendly kind of approach to that. And that would be, of course, when I'm saying gender-friendly, it should be also human rights friendly, because the human dignity should be put in the center of all of our policies and programs. The second point that I would like to mention is that I think when religion or tradition are used as a political tool in order to control and keep the power to the power lover, I would say, that is always making problem. It is not because the religion is not good. It's always the people who use the religion as a tool in order to control and keep the power. The final point that I would like to mention is that, yes, we as a woman, we need to learn from each other and stand united. And also to, because if violation of women's rights done in Afghanistan or in Lebanon or in Libya or in Yemen, that hurt us. We have to take it seriously as our own agenda and fight for it, and at least to be in solidarity and advocate for that issue. I hope I keep the timing properly. It's a lot to say, but I just stop here.
Thank you. And we'll have Q&A from the audience as well, so hopefully you can add later. Next, we'll go to Betty.
Could I come in a little later? Give me 5 minutes.
Absolutely, yeah, you can.
Thank you.
So then I think next is Safjeet.
I think it's every single individual's responsibility that sits in any space that wants to work on these types of issues, to take a hard look at your own programming, to take a hard look at your organization, your direct services, and take on a primary responsibility of how you're going to introduce gender parity and equity across all of it. And check yourselves as well. Just because our intentions are right, just because we are women ourselves, doesn't mean that we're always following our own advice. And so even like Anna Marie said earlier, and I actually chatted her this, I was like, I often do it too, where I'll pass on opportunities to other individuals because I feel like I shouldn't be the one talking about it, even though I've done the work. And so we have to do it not just for ourselves, but for our organizations and for the communities that we serve.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then Anna Maria.
Yes, I can share as well 3 quick solutions. I mean, they are part of the solution, because if we had the solutions, the world would be a better place by now. First, I would like to reiterate the fact of education and curricula, and this is something that we work on a lot at Adyan Foundation, not only regular education, but also religious education. So I would like to give a small example. Whenever we're learning Arabic and we have this Arabic textbook, all of the texts speak about women in a certain role and then about men in a different role. And even in religious education itself, we are so familiar with role models that are prophets and saints, that are men, but we do not highlight women that have played such an important role throughout history in different religious faiths. But I talk about Christianity in particular because I am more knowledgeable in that. So we are so used to male role models, especially in religious education, that we forget that there are a lot of female figures that we should celebrate and that we should look up to as well. And the other solution would be even in places of worship, in Sunday school, in mosques, in churches. We are so used to see women participating as community leaders or as Sunday school teachers. But whenever we speak about women as a religious leader herself, we're so shocked and we don't understand why is this so normalized. And here I would like to share something that happened last week. We had a virtual regional conference on religious social responsibility for Lebanon and the MENA region. And on the second day, we were particularly adamant on having 2 interviews with 2 women religious leaders, the Archbishop of Sweden, Bishop Antje Jacqueline, and Reverend Najla Kassab, who is the 3rd woman in Lebanon and Syria to be ordained as a reverend. And we were catering to the Arab world. So you would just imagine the shock of everyone of seeing such women in high religious or political leaders. But what we try to do is to break the stigma and to normalize such things. And having Bishop Antje at first, made it clearer or made it a bit easier for people to understand that there are also Lebanese women who are currently being ordained as bishops or as priests or as pastors. So this is the other solution or advice. And lastly, I would say, because we are people of faith or even beliefs or non-faith, we should have faith in women and listen to them. Because if we have faith in the women in our own community, then we have faith that they can relate challenges of other men and women, and that they can find new and innovative solutions. Because both women and youth do have this maybe different perspective and can provide new and innovative solutions to maybe peace building or conflict resolution, and that have faith that these perceptions will make us and other people better people as well. Because as long as we listen and as long as we take advice from people who think differently than we do, then this is the only way to move forward.
Thank you so much. Monique.
Yeah, I'd like to share two aspects here. The first one, an important question here is what kind of leaders we are supporting, because representation is not everything if our representative's consciousness is lacking. That's why it's important to cultivate a leadership based on values and principles such as respect, empathy, purpose, and sensibility to humanity. This sense of purpose is fundamental to create a more equitable leadership in politics. And the second one is we must trust young women's potential and hear to them. I learned that we can't build a future having leaders from previous generations, and we can't build the future having leaders exactly like us. So we need a new generation to find new solutions. And as much as we share meaningful opportunities to young women and provide them experience, we will have a more equitable and just leadership and a better future. Thanks.
Thank you. So then we're going to go to Carlos and then to Betty.
Oh.
Carlos, did you want to share any final thoughts, or should we go straight to Betty? Either one is fine. Let's go to Betty, and then we can come back to Carlos if there's anything else. Go ahead, Betty.
Thank you. Monique kind of said exactly what I was thinking
Okay,
of talking
okay,
about.
okay.
Is that okay? Hello? Am I still
Yes.
on the floor? Oh, okay.
Yes,
Right.
please go ahead.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that Monique kind of just said exactly what I wanted to say. You know, when we're talking about gender equality, let's think equality. Let's consider quality as well. Because oftentimes we're looking at statistics. And this is what I now see mainly in Africa. Oh, we must have women. But what kind of women? It's very, very important that we put emphasis on quality, in the sense that these women, when they're wherever they are, representing fellow women, can articulate women's situations effectively, as opposed to just having numbers, because that's not what we are driving at. The other thing too, I thought I would mention in here, is that there's been a lot since the Beijing conference. Researches, seminars, workshops, education, graduation on women and equality. But could we now also start, I noticed sharing of the screen, could we now start thinking and exploring resources and tools that can help, whether if we're talking about quality education for women, that that we can put into practice, as opposed to just talking about it. There are few things that can be done if we can also get our attention on exploring resources and the kind of tools we need to promote women's participation in all kinds of platforms. And then I just again want to emphasize that the role of religious leaders, whether it's peace, development, should not be ignored. I've given example of how they become the main opposition when there's human rights abuse. I find them extremely effective, and they drive the point home. So maybe we should promote that as much as possible too. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, thank you for inviting me for this meeting. I'm afraid I'm going to leave soon because I walked out of another virtual meeting. Thank you very much again, and good luck to everybody. I hope something will come out of this conversation. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to participate. I know you're a very busy woman, so we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with all of us. Thank you so much. Carlos, I'm going to come to you, but I'm going to ask you for like 2 sentences. So we can make sure we have time for Q&A from the audience. So go ahead.
Merci, merci beaucoup Gina. J'aimerais juste dire 2 choses. La première des choses, c'est que les acteurs religieux et traditionnels ont un rôle important à jouer pour changer la donne, pour changer les mentalités, pour élever le niveau de personnes qui croient en eux, parce que lorsque vous allez dans un milieu comme l'église, dans un milieu comme un centre évangélique où les gens se réunissent, ils croient à ce que les pasteurs disent, ils croient à ce que leur leader religieux leur instruit, donc ils les prennent comme une vérité absolue. Eux, ils ont une responsabilité double de pouvoir comprendre et connaître à fond le rôle que Dieu attribue à la femme, qui n'est pas celle que la communauté et les traditions, les coutumes attribuent aujourd'hui. C'est à partir de ce moment-là qu'ils pourront ajuster ou réajuster leur message de manière à pouvoir le canaliser pour élever le niveau de la communauté, afin que cette nouvelle mentalité de pouvoir travailler ensemble et pour les femmes puisse être réellement effective dans nos communautés, en Afrique particulièrement, où il y a beaucoup de vices, où il y a beaucoup de pesanteurs qui jusque-là prennent encore beaucoup de temps. Donc le souhait, le vœu de mon cœur, si on me demandait la solution, je demanderai à ce que nous puissions travailler efficacement sur les leaders religieux, les leaders traditionnels, de manière à ce que eux qui sont des influenceurs aient vraiment de messages qui vont dans le sens de promouvoir le leadership et la participation des femmes à tous les niveaux. Merci beaucoup Gina. Et merci à toutes.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing all of that really valuable information. I'm really humbled to be among all of you. So next, I would like to turn it over to Teresa Casale, the Advocacy Director for Mina's List, an organization that advances women's participation in political leadership and peace process around the world. She has more than 10 years of experience advocating to the US government, the UN, the World Bank, and other global entities. And she's going to leave us with some concrete next steps. So Teresa, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, friends around the world. It is so good to be with you all to discuss this important topic. My thanks to all of the event organizers and speakers, but especially to you, Jessica and Gina, for all of your hard work. As Gina already mentioned, I'm Teresa Casale and I work for Mina's List. We partner with women political leaders and peacemakers, many of whom come from strong faith backgrounds and religious frameworks. My own work in this space is informed by my faith, making the intersection of women's leadership and faith communities a particular passion of mine. I'm going to present a list of 8 keys that faith leaders can use to unlock the leadership of women, young women, and girls, a need that we've been discussing in depth. We've discussed the why and the what, but this is more of the how and is targeted specifically at faith leaders who want to empower women as leaders, not for someone who needs to be convinced. That's a different list. We've already touched on some of these areas. Many of these keys might be familiar to you, but I've developed this list to share with audiences beyond CSW who are not gender experts, particularly male leaders who are looking for guidance. As I go through them, Think of not only how you might use them yourself, but who you can share them with in your community. We'll be disseminating the list after the program so you can do just that. So, how can faith leaders help to advance women's leadership? The first key, listen to the voices of women in your community in all the celebrated forms of identity and experience. Anna Maria already touched on this one. In your listening, learn how the issues in your communities affect women and men differently. Noticing these differences, being consistently aware of them, is what gender professionals refer to as a gender lens, which is the opposite of being gender blind. Gender blindness used to be celebrated as a good thing for equality. But we know now that unfortunately blind spots lead to whole segments of the population and their needs becoming invisible. A gender lens is necessary for achieving equality and ultimately equity. From wars to natural disasters, climate change, and economics, different genders have different experiences, and these should be understood and accounted for. Learn the barriers that women face as leaders, including barriers that affect different populations groups, such as youth, women with disabilities, LGBTQI women, and women of ethnic and religious minorities. We'll touch on more about specific barriers in a moment. Importantly, as you listen, learn about the many benefits of women's leadership in all its forms. You'll learn this from listening, but also from seeing it in action. Mina's list believes it's a woman's right to lead, but when she does, the evidence is that it benefits everyone. Multiple studies have shown that when women lead politically, countries respond better to crisis, are more peaceful and less corrupt, experience better educational outcomes, more investments in health, stronger economic growth, tangible gains for democracy. That's quite a list. From the highest public office to the smallest house of worship, when women lead, countries and communities thrive. The second key, invest in and follow women leaders. As we've said, men hold the majority of leadership positions in both faith-based and secular spaces. Even in faith communities whose membership is predominantly women, their leaders are often predominantly men in the public space. In political leadership, 1/4 of parliamentarians in the world today are women, and 1/10 of heads of state are women. Even though this represents a tremendous amount of growth and progress over the last 30 years, it is still not at all representative of general population and is woefully inadequate. This often makes women feel like they are climbing a steep and dangerous mountain without the proper tools to help them succeed. Build the capacity and confidence of women faith leaders by mentoring them and investing in them. Consistently and progressively offer training and learning opportunities so they can not only lead, but lead well and continue to grow. Follow women leaders. For someone to lead, someone must follow. Trust women to lead you. Pass the mic and cede space. As you follow them, your community will follow you in respecting their leadership and learning from them. Support women leaders publicly and loudly, not just behind the scenes or with tacit approval. Advocate for the full and equal participation at all levels in both your faith community and in the secular spaces that you occupy. The third key, we've also briefly touched on this one. Use your capacity, connections, and convening power to provide space for women to speak and lead. Houses of worship excel at gathering, building networks and connections, and mobilizing their communities. Use your networks to connect women to decision makers and support their own decision-making power by amplifying their voices, ideas, and solutions to problems. Offer your resources of space, facilities, infrastructure, and technology to support women leaders and women-led movements and initiatives. These leaders are tackling issues that impact your communities deeply. They need as many resources as possible to do this, which brings me to the fourth key. And my next three keys are related to the key barriers that research and experience have shown must be addressed to advance women as leaders: funding, violence, and sexist norms. Or to use a phrase coined by a feminist Indian organization, Netri, money, muscle, and misogyny. So the fourth key, help to fund and find funding for women leaders and their initiatives. Funding for women's movements, women-led initiatives, and women's time is one of the biggest barriers for women to be able to lead. Help them access funds when and where available. The fifth key, call out, prevent, and address violence against women. Women in public life and leadership face disproportionately high levels of violence and harassment. In political leadership, the Interparliamentary Union has found that up to 82% of women parliamentarians have experienced psychological violence. This has been greatly compounded by the rise of social media and other forms of digital technology, but it is not new. Men in political leadership also face violence, but it has different motivations and is weaponized against women specifically to keep them from positions of influence. This is a key barrier to women's participation in all forms of leadership in public life. Fortunately, this topic is being discussed and examined in depth in forums such as CSW, but unfortunately, often when it comes to communities of faith, this issue still exists in the shadows. In your communities, go out of your way to look for incidents of violence, harassment, abuse, and exploitation. They won't always present themselves. Call out this issue broadly and bring it out of the shadows and into the light. Address incidents immediately and strongly reject a culture of impunity. When women report incidents of violence or harassment, believe them. Who we believe and when we believe them says a lot about where our values are. When women lead, they do and will receive pushback, as we've stated, some of which can come in the form of violence. Believing women is the first and most important step to pushing back against that pushback. It creates a space where women are safe and where abuse cannot thrive. The sixth key, we've also touched on the importance of this one. Learn, understand, and amplify feminist theology. As too many of us know, problematic norms and beliefs about women's leadership are often fueled by patriarchy and supported by misinterpretations and misunderstandings of religious texts. No matter what your faith tradition, there are mountains of feminist literature and analysis on religious interpretations of women's role in society to be read and learned. Seek them out, let them inform your own views, and put them into practice. Encourage your community to do the same. Empower them to speak up for women and to raise the issue of why gender equality is important for society from a faith-based perspective. The seventh key, collaborate with government officials for institutional change. As a trusted community leader, use your influence to be active in policy discussions and advancing women's leadership. When there are gaps between women's movements and policymaking that affects them, helping to bridge that gap can be incredibly powerful. Call for inclusion, meaningful participation, and representation when working for policy change. You can support this call by using the information you've gathered through listening about the barriers and challenges women face and work to address them at a policy level with women. Finally, our eighth key, continue to self-examine. We've touched on the importance of this for everybody as well. Commit to a posture of learning and continuously improving. We always won't get it right. Humility and commitment to growth goes a long way. This will also help with listening, which brings us full circle back to our first key. I hope this list offers some guiding light to you on your journey for gender equality in the faith space, a journey that should always continue. And I'm happy to answer any questions in our Q&A session. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. You've really taken the burden off me as a moderator to do a great summation and next concrete step. So I really, really appreciate that. I know we're quite short on time, but we do have one question from the audience that I'd like to pose to our panelists. So just flagging for one or two of you to respond. I think maybe, and Maria, you would have a good response to this question. So just flagging for you, but if any other panelists want to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand and I can come to you. So the question comes from Mark Sheffer, who's with the Baha'i International Community United Nations Office. And he says, often religious teaching serves to legitimize and reinforce dominant cultural norms rather than functioning as a tool to elevate and transform those norms. So how do you feel religious communities can more actively and effectively translate the high ideals at the core of their scriptures into practical and lived realities? So I don't know who wants to take it first, but go ahead and just unmute and we can go to you. Go ahead.
Is Dr. Seema's gonna respond or?
Go ahead and I will respond after you.
I'll just respond really fast because this is this question in particular is something that I've been working on a lot through the concept of what we coined as religious social responsibility. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with corporate social responsibility, how companies can be responsible towards their society. So we thought how religions can be responsible towards their communities, whether it's the same religious backgrounds or different religious backgrounds. So at the core of religious social responsibility, we have two things. One, to focus on the core values, like Mark was asking. So the religious teachings, which focus, in the case of Lebanon, it's Islam, Christianity, on the core values between Islam and Christianity on one side. So this is the education side, how religious leaders are using the narrative in their homilies and sermons. And on the practical side, how to get those common values and implement them in their local communities through faith-based initiatives or through community initiatives. In our case, for instance, right now, they can be socioeconomic in nature, they can be environmental in nature. So you have this multi-level, multi-pronged approach through one, the teachings of common values, and two, the implementation of these common values in different areas in life. So this is just a summary, but this could be a response to the question that was asked.
Thank you. We'll go to Dr. Samar.
Yes, I think
yes, please.
One, I think it's really important that we accept the diversity because we keep saying tolerate. Tolerance is not enough for me. I think they should accept that we are diverse and everybody has the right to think the way or believe the way they want. The second point, I think, I insist on the human rights-based approach on the issues of socio-economic and cultural, whatever rights you have. If it's based on human rights-based approach, then we will solve a lot of problems within the society. And thirdly, I think on the issue of, let's say, women and religion and so on, I think one important issue is that to recognize that we do exist and they should give us the space. Recognition, inclusion, and support. Because sometimes the leaders include some women, and not much in our country, not much on the religious sector or section, but then they don't support. They want to use women as a token to put in some position, and then they don't support, and then they would say that, yes, they don't have the capacity. And fourth point that I would like to call on women and particularly on the young generation, that please be strong, and nothing is impossible. Everything is possible, requires a little bit commitment and hard work. So we will achieve that with a very strong youth around us.
Thank you. And what an uplifting note to end on. So I'm going to just say a big thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you for me. I've learned so much. I'm going to flip it over to Anne Quackenbos, who's the gender, peace, and security expert for Cordaid, who will give us some closing remarks. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you so much, Gina, and thank you so much to all the speakers. I will try to not take too much time out of your day anymore. I think when we started working on this together with Jessica and everyone else, it was clear that this is a topic that we really need to explore more on. For a long time, especially the organizations working on faith-based and religious partnerships were not always connected to the feminist and the women peace security organizations. Now that we are starting to create this space where we have this dialogue, for me, it's becoming clearer and clearer how incredibly relevant this topic is. And I'm really glad we're starting this conversation more and more, and I hope, and that's also our aim, that we can keep that up in the future even more. There's clearly a need. As we know, most people in the world have at least some sort of affiliation with religion, and especially in some of the countries we work on when it comes to women peace security. I'm really looking forward to continue on working on this. So as this group with who we facilitated this, we aim to write a little report on this with recommendations that came from this session, which we will share with all of you. And also really important, we get feedback on this, because just to start, we also hope to organize more events on this topic to really dive more into some of the things we've discussed today. For example, what Dr. Sima Samar was just referring to, like how do we actually link to this human rights-based approach? How do we ensure that indeed this conversation is not only held with some of the elder generations, because often the power within religious institutions lies with them. Little things like that, how can we elaborate more on that? Although I have to say in this event, I think we had a very good representation of different groups and backgrounds. We really want to continue to raise these issues, work on that. And I really hope you all want to stay connected. Again, thank you so much to all the speakers. And thank you so much to all the partners. It was really, really great preparing this. And I think it was one of the best events when it comes to preparation we've been a part of. I know it is recorded, so I need to check with Jessica if we can also share it at a later point, for example, for our YouTube channels for people to watch back. I need to check that, but I think it should be fine. Seeing Jessica nodding. Thank you so much. And I think I can speak on behalf of all of us that we're really looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.